following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us at the web at nfradioreading.org. And good morning on this Victory Monday as the Bills once again came back and thrilled us, and I have to get an appointment with my cardiologist again. So the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, December 8th. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki. And we start off with a quick look at the weather. If you've been outside already, you know it's very cold. So it's going to be very cold throughout this day with some clouds and sun. The high will get all the way up to 22 degrees. It'll be frigid tonight with a low of 10. We're expecting 1 to 3 inches of snow tomorrow with a high of 35. And Wednesday, it gets a little dicey. It's a mix of snow and rain, accumulating anywhere from a coating to an inch. And if there's heavier snow, it could make the roads extremely slippery. The high on Wednesday is projected to be 38 degrees. So looks like a couple of really treacherous days in store for us this week to start this week off. The normal high and low for today, the normal high is 40 degrees and the low is 28. The record high was 69 degrees in 1998. And the record low was 5 degrees in 1906. And last year, the high was 38 degrees and the low 27 degrees. And in looking around the nation, yesterday's extremes, the high was in McAllen, Texas of 89 degrees, and the low was in Cook, Minnesota, a minus 20. So maybe we should look at our weather with a little bit of a grateful eye here. And our weather trivia for today is, what is the most treacherous form of winter precipitation? And the answer is freezing rain on a bare surface. And that's certainly a possibility for later this week. So we get ready and it's like, open the window and see what we got that day. All right, over to you, Ed.
Okay, thank you. And turning to the front page of today's Buffalo News, our first story is headlined, Ryan wants level playing field for developers in the city. Mayor-elect eyes a revamp of the permits process and strategic planning office. Buffalo's mayor-to-be says he plans to revamp the city's permits process and its Office of Strategic Planning to take the mystery out of project reviews and approvals so that proposals are treated fairly, equally, and efficiently, regardless who they come from. State Senator Sean Ryan, who will become the city's new mayor on January 1st, said he wants to encourage more development and investment in the city by corporations, developers, and even individual homeowners by making it easy and straightforward to get the answers they need. That way, he said, when they have projects, they can come through smoothly and quickly. We want to make it so that people can come to Buffalo and invest and not have hurdles they unnecessarily have to jump over, Ryan said. Customer satisfaction has to be a part of what we deliver, whether it's somebody coming into City Hall to pay their dog license or a major developer coming in to move forward with their project. On Friday, Ryan took one of his first big steps, announcing that he would install 4 deputy mayors for his administration to divide up responsibilities for city government and free up department heads to better manage day-to-day activity. Modeled after the state's deputy secretary system, it's designed to give departments more support while making city government more nimble. One of those deputy mayors, if confirmed by the Common Council, would be Thomas Baines, who would be responsible for the Office of Strategic Planning and the Department of Permits and Inspection Services, the two agencies most engaged in economic and real estate development. OSP oversees the city's planning department, including the Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Preservation Board. And Ryan, who's been more critical of developers than his predecessors in the past, said you should expect changes in the makeup and structure of those agencies and boards, although he would not be more specific. While all three boards have had new members appointed in recent years, both the planning and zoning boards have had the same chairman for more than 2 decades. Ryan, who spent 14 years in the state legislature, said he wants to bring top corporate executives in Buffalo together for a meeting before Christmas, quote, to listen to them, hear their concerns, but also encourage them to not just maintain faith in Buffalo, but to encourage them to continue their investment and growth in the city, close quote. A big part of that means simplifying the process for them. It's making it rational. Right now, it's not a rational process, he said. You're going up and down stairs from one department to the next department without any consideration of making this user experience a friendly one. You can go through the same permits process at Amherst in a lot shorter time. But it also means eliminating any sense of favoritism or need to cozy up to city leaders, including Ryan himself. We want to take the mystery out of it, he said. We just want a system that functions rationally. The mayor-elect said he recently met for lunch with, quote, someone pushing a project through, end quote, and at the end of the lunch, quote, they said I really need permits by the end of January. I said we would help them with that, but a year from now, you're not going to have a meeting with me to help your permits go through, Ryan said. Citing an experience the developer said he had in Florida, Ryan added, everyone's permits get approved and reviewed in the same manner, and that's what we want to bring to City Hall. Ryan acknowledged the challenge that developers face with most commercial real estate projects, citing high interest rates, construction costs, and shortfall of financing. Developers like Doug Jamal, Simonelli Real Estate Corporation, Uniland Development, and Ellicott Development Company, among others, have put most plans on hold unless they are tenant-driven and funded. And both Jamal and Nick Sinatra have sought help from the government for specific projects. That's why he wants the city to do its part to help where it can and within limits. We know nationally that interest rates are high and getting brick-and-mortar projects off the ground are difficult, Ryan said. We want to make sure the parts that are controlled by the city go easy and smoothly. But the city, which is confronting a structural budget deficit for years after years of using other funds to cover gaps, has no money to provide grants to specific projects, and we're not in that business, Ryan added. So the city will get away from focusing on particular projects or developers and will instead focus on developing comprehensive plans for targeted neighborhoods or sections of the city, such as downtown or commercial strips.
Also on today's front page, conservative justice's project meets Trump's desire to force out officials. As a young staff member in the Reagan administration, John Roberts was a part of a group of lawyers who pushed for more White House control over independent government agencies. The time may be ripe to consider the existence of such entities and take action to bring them back within the executive branch, the future Chief Justice of the United States advised the White House counsel in a 1983 memo. Independent agencies, he wrote, were a, quote, constitutional anomaly, end quote. Once he ascended to the Supreme Court, Roberts, as Chief Justice, joined other conservatives on the bench in a series of rulings that have chipped away at Congress's power to constrain the president's authority to fire independent regulators. The decades-long project of the conservative legal movement collides Monday when the case is argued in the court. At stake is President Trump's desire to oust officials across the government in defiance of federal laws meant to protect their jobs and to shield them from politics. The result, the Supreme Court's recent decisions suggest, is that the majority will likely side with Trump in a move that could significantly shift power from Congress to the president and usher in a dramatic change in the way the federal government is structured. This is not a bolt out of the blue said Deepak Gupta, a lawyer representing an agency official in a separate case who was also fired by the president. There is a tendency to see this as merely part of a recent short-term drama about President Trump. But really, a majority of the justices have long been sympathetic to the argument that the Trump administration is making here. And that's a view that transcends this presidency, he said. Monday's case specifically tests whether Trump can fire Rebecca Slaughter, a Democratic member of the Federal Trade Commission, simply because he says she does not align with his agenda, and despite a law that says the president can only remove commissioners for, quote, inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office, end quote. The administration is asking the justices to toss a 90-year-old precedent that said the Constitution allowed laws like the one that let Congress put limits on the president's authority to dismiss some quasi-independent government officials. The court's ruling, expected by the end of June, has implications for more than 24 other agencies charged with protecting consumers, workers, the environment, and nuclear safety, and have traditionally been insulated from complete presidential control by similar laws. Since he returned to the White House, Trump has repeatedly ousted Democratic leaders of independent agencies, including at the National Labor Relations Board, the Merit Systems Protection Board, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission, to make way for replacements who share his policy priorities. A number of officials have sued. The Supreme Court has generally allowed their firings to take effect, but has done so in temporary emergency orders, while their lawsuits proceeded through lower courts. In Slaughter's case, the court will render a final and lasting judgment on the legality of Trump's firings, a major test for the justices to determine how far to expand presidential power. In January, the Supreme Court will separately consider whether the president has the power to fire Lisa Cook, a Federal Reserve Board governor. In that case, the justices have allowed Cook to remain in her post for now, signaling that the central bank's history may mean it can be uniquely insulated from presidential interference. The Trump administration's robust view of the executive is being weighed by the conservative Supreme Court majority that has also embraced the so-called unitary executive theory. That is the idea, dating back to the Reagan administration, that the Constitution vests all executive power in the president, and that he must be able to control everything the executive branch does. Some conservatives on the court have been signaling for years that they were eager to overturn the precedent that was decided in 1935 that protects independent agencies. In a 2010 decision, Roberts said the president's power generally includes, quote, the authority to remove those who assist him in carrying out his duties. Without such power, the president could not be held fully accountable for discharging his own responsibilities, end quote. Then in 2020, during Trump's first term, the court took a major step toward expanding the president's power to fire independent officials. In a 5-4 decision, the court said the structure of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was unconstitutional because it did not allow the president to fire the director without cause. But the majority decision, again, written by the Chief Justice, made a distinction between government agencies run by a single director and those led by a multi-member commission that do not wield substantial executive power. In its recent emergency orders, the court, with 3 justices nominated by Trump, has telegraphed strongly that it is now poised to give the president more direct control over those agencies as well.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 14 minutes past the hour. And now it's time to turn to the editorial page, and today's editorial is titled Better Outreach, and this has to do with the Buffalo Public Schools. District leaders need effective ways to share information on school closures. In the movie Cool Hand Luke, released in 1967, the captain, played by Strother Martin, utters the famous and since oft-repeated line, "What we've got here is a failure to communicate." That situation applies to the Buffalo Public Schools, at least in regards to its plan to close 2 schools. However it happens, there must be better efforts to share information on this. Fair or not, a number of parents and some students showed up recently to complain to the district about its failure to provide information about the impending closures. The big question, which 2 schools? According to the district, no conclusion has been reached. The purpose of the December 1st meeting at the Buffalo Academy for Visual and Performing Arts was to listen to community speakers and collect more feedback to add to the results of the survey. The survey is part of a 2-month effort to collect and evaluate data that would help pinpoint the closures. The process will culminate when Superintendent Pascal Mubenga reviews the 2 schools chosen by the closure committee and presents them to the Buffalo School Board for a vote on December 17th. That's it. The meeting was intended to be part of the information gathering process, gathering views from a full house of parents, students, and community members, but that is not how things turned out, not by a long shot. Attendance was low, and misinformation was high. As the News' Ben Shuzumoto reported, many who did show up were miffed. A late-arriving group of high school students who had tried to join the meeting virtually from their Massachusetts Avenue Project Growing Green Works Youth Community Program entered just in time and in person. They felt their questions to the virtual chat had been disregarded. Students complained that they had just heard about the district's plans to close the schools due to budget constraints and had misinterpreted an early part of the presentation by Sharon Brown, Buffalo Schools' Chief of Student Support Services. One student bemoaned that the meeting could have been better advertised in the district and then expressed concern that Olmsted or City Honors might close. Similar complaints about lack of advertising were expressed by parents and guardians of students. District officials remain understandably frustrated. They sent emails and text messages about the meeting. Further, the meeting and the school closing issue has been reported in the local media, including in the news. And yet, the smattering who attended the perhaps ill-timed meeting immediately following the holiday break criticized the process. Now, the closure committee has 1 meeting remaining on Thursday. The 12 members are expected to reach a consensus on the 2 schools set to close. The closure committee meeting is not public, but there will be public meetings scheduled at both schools selected by the committee before December 17th. District officials must try harder to draw larger audiences at those upcoming meetings. Here are some suggestions. School announcements. Getting the message to a captive audience of students in regular intervals. Text messages and emails to parents and guardians, already being used, but perhaps with an opt-in feature to ensure messages are received. Enhanced apps that allow teachers to communicate with parents and guardians about homework, tests, etc., could also convey messages about discussions on school closures. Instagram. Use this issue as a platform to build on the district's roughly 1,700 followers and grow the numbers with school meeting announcements. And lastly, church. Even if parents and guardians are busy working, maybe another relative in attendance or community could help spread the word. Bottom line, there is an urgency to identify the two schools, according to Brown, because of the ensuing student transition. The lottery for student placement for the 2026-27 school year begins in January with registration following in February. Further failures to communicate could cause big problems.
And we turn now to the Another Voice column. And today's topic is artificial intelligence. And this message was submitted by Chris Carney, who's a former member of Congress, a senior policy advisor at the Nossaman LLP, and a board member of the American Edge Project. And the headline of it is, American Security Depends on Keeping Up with AI. Microsoft's latest cybersecurity report should be a wake-up call for policymakers from Albany to Washington. Russia and China and other adversaries are using artificial intelligence to supercharge cyber attacks against the United States. Moscow and Beijing have long relied on propaganda and disinformation to weaken adversaries. Now, they're using AI to amplify these efforts, and their common target is the United States. Used wisely, AI will strengthen America's cybersecurity, drive economic growth, and create better jobs for working families across the country. That's why our mission isn't to slow AI down, but to keep ahead of our adversaries in developing and deploying it. If China's authoritarian-based AI, built on censorship, control, and surveillance, becomes embedded in the world's digital infrastructure, free expression and open inquiry will disappear. We must meet them with equal innovative might, grounded in democratic principles, not totalitarian control. One way to ensure America leads the globe in AI innovation is to enact the White House's AI Action Plan into law. I rarely agree with President Trump, but this plan presents a strong strategic roadmap to ensure American AI writes the digital future. The plan would invest in key pillars of leadership, including modernizing America's aging energy grid, a robust and reliable grid, expanded transmission, and new generation capacity, including renewables, are essential to sustain the AI revolution. China will invest $300 billion more than the United States in energy this year alone, generates 2 times more power than the U.S., and is on track to add 60% more by 2040. If we fail to modernize our grid, America's AI future will be capped by energy transmission limits. In New York, Governor Hochul's Empire AI Public-Private Academic Partnership offers a blueprint for other states to attract investment and foster ethical AI innovation. By strengthening the grid, her administration recognizes that AI innovation requires energy innovation. These foreign threats are real, but so is our capacity to push back. Let's treat the upgrading of our power grid with the urgency that it deserves.
Well, next we're going to turn to today's political cartoon, and this is a single panel cartoon with 2 people in it, one being Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and the other being Admiral Frank Bradley, and this has to do with the destruction of a boat alleged to be carrying drugs in the Caribbean. And here we see the Secretary pinning a medal on the Admiral, and the Secretary is saying, "Admiral Bradley, for flawlessly executing your mission during a little thing I call the fog of war. Well, the medal is labeled blame, and the Admiral has a thought cloud there that he's thinking to himself, you mean the haze of Hegseth. So I describe, and you can decide what that means.
Well, our opinion pieces today seem to be focusing on education. And our first one is Rethinking Education's Same Old Blueprint. And it's submitted by Olli-Pekka Heinonen. For more than a century, American education has been driven by the same invisible engine: standardization, rows of desks, national tests, rankings. From No Child Left Behind to statewide report cards, we have long measured success by what can be quantified, compared, and controlled. This model, born in the industrial age, is buckling under the weight of a new world. The challenges today cannot be solved by scoring higher on a math exam. Climate disruption, mental health crises, the rise of AI, and the strains on democracy require a different kind of learning, one that nurtures agency, resilience, ethics, and interdependence. In short, we must challenge past assumptions to imagine an education fit for the future. Lifelong adaptability, learning new skills, navigating change, and applying knowledge in new contexts have become essential. In such a world, assessments that capture what students know at a fixed moment in time say little about their potential to keep growing. Many educational systems are trapped in illusions of modernity, beliefs in simplicity, permanence, competition, and control, among others. These illusions made sense in a previous era. However, they are now misaligned with the complexity and fragility of our interconnected world, as I argue in my book, Learning as If Life Depended on It. One of the most damaging illusions is that success can be universally defined and measured. In reality, young people are asking questions. How can I make a meaningful life? How can I make life better for others and the planet? The answers to such questions are not found in class rankings or rigid curricula. In the United States, the pressures of high-stakes testing and narrow success metrics have contributed to teacher burnout and student disengagement. We also see growing movements calling for change, project-based learning, competency-based assessment, and new models of student voice. These are not fringe ideas. Instead of asking how to improve the current system incrementally, we should be asking a deeper question. What is the purpose of education today? If it's merely to sort individuals into roles within an economy, then we will continue to underprepare them for the moral and planetary challenges ahead. However, if it's to help fully form human beings, young people who are curious, collaborative, and courageous, then we must change not only what we teach, but how we think about learning itself. It means being clear about what matters most and designing systems that reward the learning we value. This might involve assessing how students collaborate across cultures, resolve conflicts, and learn from failure. These things are harder to measure, but far more vital. The future of education will not be built by doubling down on past models. It will emerge from those willing to ask hard questions, listen deeply, and redesign for relevance. For U.S. school systems, this is an opportunity not just to reform, but to reimagine. As we move deeper into the 21st century, We must remember that standardized tests were never meant to prepare students for an unpredictable world. They were meant to control a predictable one. That world is gone. Let us build the next one by reimagining what learning can be.
Well, our second column also deals with education, and it's from Andrew Klein, who writes for InsideSources.com, and his headline is Standardized Tests Help Students by Creating Accountability. When the College Board canceled SAT testing in 2020, hundreds of colleges adopted test-optional admissions policies for that fall. The Urban Institute reported that the number of four-year colleges and universities going test-optional nearly doubled in 1 year, from 713 to 1,350. Test-optional admissions had been spreading before the pandemic on the theory that standardized tests were inherently biased and discriminatory. The pandemic gave progressive college admissions offices an excuse to jettison an old tradition many blame for campus and societal disparities. By the fall of 2023, more than 80% of American bachelor-granting institutions had eliminated admission test requirements, according to Fair Test, which advocates for such policies. Eliminating the exams was intended to help disadvantaged students by replacing a vestige of systematic inequality with more accurate, more subjective measures of students' academic preparedness. The results were predictable. A 2023 study by Harvard University economist Raj Chetty and his team demonstrated that the use of subjective criteria for assessing student application benefits students from higher income families and disadvantages academically promising students from lower income families. Citing Chetty's research, Harvard reinstated standardized testing for admissions in 2024. Confirming Chetty's conclusions, Dartmouth College researchers this spring showed that test-optional policies reduce the probability of admission for high-achieving, disadvantaged students. Disadvantaged students with an SAT score above 1,400 were more than 3 times as likely to receive an admissions officer if they submitted their score than if they did not. The case against standardized testing is that it merely reinforces structural inequalities inherent in U.S. education. Studies show instead that testing is a valuable predictor of future academic success and an effective accountability tool. Testing provides educators, students, parents, and policymakers with vital information about student performance and school effectiveness. Rigorous, high-quality testing has been shown not only to measure but also improve student performance, even among the lowest performing students. A 2024 study of Missouri students found that students with high scores on reading, math, and science tests in 8th grade are dramatically more likely to earn a bachelor's degree within 5 years of finishing high school. Much of the opposition to standardized tests stems not from the idea that they don't work, but from the realization that they do. Quality accountability measures always generate resistance, whether from those to whom they apply or from ideologues who imagine that systematic oppression lurks behind all traditions and scientific standards. Standardized testing can be misused and improperly implemented. It's been shown to measure, predict, and improve academic outcomes accurately. Eliminating it would harm the students whom such ill-conceived moves are allegedly designed to help.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 34 minutes after the hour. And turning now to some national news, Genealogy's website's policy update makes solving crimes harder. Since online genealogy services began operating, millions of people have sent them saliva samples in hopes of learning about their family roots and discovering far-flung relatives. These services also appeal to law enforcement authorities, who have used them to solve cold case murders. Crime scene DNA submitted to genealogy sites has helped investigators identify suspects and human remains by first identifying relatives. The use of public records and family tree building is crucial to this technique, and its main tool has been the genealogy site Ancestry. More than 1,400 cases have been solved with the help of so-called genetic genealogy investigations, most of them with help from Ancestry. But a recent step taken by the site is now deterring many police agencies. In August, Ancestry revised the terms and conditions on its site to make it clear that its services were off limits for law enforcement purposes without a legal order or warrant, which can be hard to get because of privacy concerns. This followed the addition last year to the terms and conditions that the services could not be used for, quote, judicial proceedings, end quote. Investigators say the implications are dire and will result in crucial criminal cases slowing or stalling entirely, denying answers to grieving families. Everyone who does this work has depended on the records database that Ancestry controls. For the Rambo Center, whose records have helped solve dozens of cases, but the center got an email last month saying its account had been canceled for violating the company's terms and conditions. In its letter, Ancestry said that it had recently become aware that your account is soliciting DNA samples to be used for cold cases. In a statement, Ancestry spokesperson Gina Spatafore said the company clarified a long-standing policy.
Well, staying with national news now, our next headline is, on cusp of citizenship, some see it elude their grasp. Raul Vaefe followed all the rules. He obtained his green card, passed his civics test and his naturalization interview, and underwent multiple background checks. After 8 years in the United States, Vaefe, an Iranian-born mental health worker who emigrated from Austria, was days away from becoming an American citizen when he learned in a 4-sentence email that his naturalization ceremony scheduled for Friday had been canceled. I was so excited, Vaefe said in a recent interview, referring to the honor of officially calling himself an American. His mother had even bought a new dress for the occasion. This is one wish that many people have from all over the world. That honor is now paused indefinitely. After an Afghan refugee was charged in last month's shooting of 2 National Guard members in Washington, the Trump administration has made changes to limit legal immigration, including halting the entire process for people from 19 countries that the White House put under a travel ban earlier this year. From Massachusetts to California, people seeking citizenship and their lawyers say federal immigration officials are canceling naturalization interviews and oath ceremonies for immigrants from Iran, Sudan, Eritrea, Haiti, Somalia, and other countries restricted by President Trump in June. Those almost new citizens have been left in uncertainty about their futures in the United States, with some making sure they carry their documents in case they're questioned by immigration authorities as they go about their daily lives. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the agency that oversees the immigration system, has not released data on the number of people affected, but the new wave of actions is likely to affect thousands from some of the poorest and most unstable nations in the world. Trump and his administration officials have argued their ban against these targeted nations is necessary to secure the country from foreign terrorists and those who overstay U.S. visas. There's no time frame. Nobody knows how long this is going to take, said Teresa Coles de Villa, an immigration lawyer in San Antonio who has struggled to obtain answers from federal immigration officials, as she has sought to advise an Iranian client whose ceremony this month was canceled. Literally, no one knows what's happening, she said. The policy changes narrowing the legal path to citizenship have been unfolding more slowly and less publicly than the dramatic scenes that have played out on the streets as masked agents have raided homes, workplaces, and courthouses searching for people to deport. The changes are among the many attempts on multiple fronts to tighten who can call themselves an American in the United States. The Supreme Court on Friday announced that it would take up a landmark dispute over the constitutionality of Trump's effort to end birthright citizenship, guaranteed in the 14th Amendment, that American citizenship should be extended to anyone born in the United States. Senator Bernie Moreno, a Republican of Ohio, who emigrated with his family as a child from their native Colombia this past week, introduced legislation that would end dual citizenship in the United States. This year, the Trump administration reinstated a more difficult civics test and ramped up social media vetting for people seeking to become naturalized citizens. Immigration officers have also been directed to check for more, quote, positive attributes like family caregiving and stable employment.
In financial news, we turn back to the front page where the headline is, Historic Cannabis Dispensary is set to close up shop. He was first in, and now he's among the first out. Aaron Van Camp, who opened Western New York's first state-licensed recreational dispensary on Main Street in 2023 to great fanfare, is ready to get out of the local marketplace. Frustrated with state politics and anticipating a drastically shrinking market share to come as more dispensaries open and competition increases, Dank 716, that's located at 501 Main Street, will permanently close its doors in January. Dank's business boomed after it opened when it was the only dispensary in the Buffalo-Niagara region. But with dozens of dispensaries now open locally, the cannabis business is getting tougher. We were still profitable, but we can clearly see a path not being that. We're happy to be leaving downtown Buffalo on our own terms. Van Camp was the biggest local beneficiary of the state's slow rollout of its legal cannabis marketplace, which in its early days was slow to approve new cannabis dispensary locations. That meant limited competition for dispensaries like Dank 716, which could draw customers from far and wide because of a lack of competition. But now, Van Camp worries that the state is going too far the other way, and that soon the cannabis market will have too many dispensaries and too much competition, which will eventually drive many pot stores out of business. He referred to recent remarks by Felicia Reed, acting executive director of the New York State Office of Cannabis Management, who has said that the New York legal cannabis market could potentially support up to 2,000 retail dispensaries. Felicia did a wonderful job of getting stores open, which was badly needed for the farmers. But the guidance that she's since received may be some of the worst known to mankind, Van Camp said. Statements she'd made about viability of having 2,000 stores in this state makes me want to see if there was an error in her passing the math portion of the social services exam, he said. New York celebrated the opening of its 500th dispensary last month in Rochester. Van Camp feels quadrupling the number of cannabis stores would be catastrophic for smaller operators, such as those who took the earliest risks in the business, the so-called legacy sellers, who had past cannabis-related offenses and were given priority in getting the first licenses. So, Ed, it sounds like this man's dream is going up in smoke.
Yes, it does. Our next story in world news, Trump's disdain toward elites in Europe is official. The Trump administration has not exactly kept its low regard for Europe secret. President Trump has long portrayed European allies as freeloaders that failed to pay enough for their own security and argued that the European Union was, quote, formed to screw the United States. Now, that hostility is official White House policy. The Trump administration issued a national security strategy paper this past week calling for European nations to take, quote, primary responsibility, unquote, for their own defense, indicating that the United States should no longer guarantee Europe's security. It accused the EU of stifling, quote, political liberty, unquote, warned that some NATO members risk becoming majority non-European, and said that the U.S. should align with, quote, patriotic European parties, unquote, code for Europe's far-right movements. The blunt, bracing, and official nature of the document added injury to incessant insult, making clear to mainstream European leaders that they stand at a strategic crossroads. On a paper stamped with the president's seal, the transatlantic alliance was being openly denigrated by the superpower across the ocean that has ensured European security in the 80 years since the end of World War II. It's up there at whitehouse.gov, staring the world in the face. Charles Kupchan, who was Senior Director for European Affairs on the National Security Council in the Obama administration, said, and that makes it very hard to digest. Added Kupchan, now a professor at the International Affairs at Georgetown University. The now explicit prospect of the United States withdrawing its protection came days after Russia, whose talking points on European countries, some experts said, were echoed in the strategy document, warned that it was ready for war with Europe. It made more urgent a debate within the continent about whether its long-term interest lay in holding on to America regardless of the humiliations or in facing a new reality, arming up and going alone. Is this going to be the moment of European awakening, said Nathalie Tocci, a professor at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University, who has worked as an advisor to key EU officials and wrote one of its strategy reports? Anticipating a fissure in the transatlantic relations, European governments have in recent years tried to wean themselves off of U.S. military might by increasing their own defense spending and cross-border military cooperation. Several have introduced or expanded military service, with Germany, one of the countries best placed to defend the continent in a major land conflict, passing legislation on Friday to increase its forces by nearly 50%. And the EU now has a commissioner for defense whose primary job is to boost regional arms production and cooperation. But the reality remains that Europe, lacking real military integration, key capabilities, and ammunition, is hugely reliant on the United States and on an administration that professes to not like it much, a change some argued was necessary. Till now, there was no, let's say, systemic response, said Romano Prodi, former president of the European Commission, the executive branch of the EU. He said he hoped the bloc would elaborate a policy that made it more assertive. This does not mean to break links with the United States, he said. This means to have a voice. But the lack of strong public outcry from Europe's leaders about the strategy document indicated that they had gotten used to Trump's tantrums. It was, Padre said, nothing new, dividing Europe and despising Europe, and had decided the best response to him was to let him cry it out and hold the alliance close. Kaja Kallas, the EU's top diplomat, exemplified that approach on Saturday, saying in response to the U.S. document that the United States was still our biggest ally. Kupchan, a professor of international relations, said that Europe's leaders understood that biting the Trump bullet was the smarter, perhaps only long-term play. He said that the document made it harder for them to stomach the humiliation and concessions necessary to keep Trump close to their position on the major issues of the day, from trade policy to Europe's defense of Ukraine in its war with Russia.
As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. And we have no local death listings, but we have 3 obituaries today. The first is Pam Hugg, the maverick post-punk Scottish designer whose exquisite, otherworldly clothes almost defied description, died on November 26th in London. She was 74. Next, Walter Dowdle, a microbiologist and second in command at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, helped lead the nation's early response to AIDS and later worked with the World Health Organization on a global effort to eradicate polio. Died on November 17th in Georgia. He was 94. And finally, Guy Congeval, an art historian, curator, and museum director whose boundary-breaking approach drew thousands to exhibitions at one of France's flagship cultural institutions, the Musée d'Orsay, which he led from 2008 to 2017, died on November 13th in Paris. He was 70. Again, if you need any further information on these names, call us at 716-821-5555. Again, 716-821-5555.
And now it's time to check George and Nichols' Royal Stars. And happy birthday if today is your birthday. You are idealistic, enthusiastic, and determined to live life to the fullest. You have intense responses to your world. You want to bring happiness to others. This year is your turn to rest. Take time to rejuvenate your energy. Focus on your needs. Now, the stars show the kind of day you're going to have. 5 stars are dynamic, 4 stars are positive, 3 are average, 2 are so-so, and 1 is difficult, and I've got to say this isn't a good day. Everybody has either 2 or 3 star days today. We'll start with Aries, which is a 2-star day. Steer clear of controversial subjects like politics, religion, and racial issues if you want to keep your peace of mind today. Everyone around you is looking for an argument. Tonight, you should relax. For Taurus, it's a 3-star day. This week begins with touchy conversations about shared property and finances. Your efforts to clarify something with a friend or even a group might be met with hostility and closed doors. Tonight, you should cocoon. For Gemini, it's a 2-star day. This is not the day to ask bosses, parents, or people in authority for approval or permission. Their response will likely be, talk to the hand. Tonight, the word is discussions. For Cancer, it's a 3-star day. Relations with coworkers, healthcare workers, and people who might be involved with the care of your pet are just some of the challenges you will face today. Tonight, you should check your belongings. For Leo, also a 3-star day. Today, the moon is in your sign, which makes you more emotional than usual. Indeed, conversations with your kids and romantic partners will be difficult. Tonight, though, you win. For Virgo, a 2-star day. Interactions with partners, close friends, and family members are truly challenging today because people are short-tempered and grumpy. Tonight, you'll seek solitude. For Libra, also a 2-star day. Don't be too aggressive with siblings, relatives, and daily contacts today. You might regret it. Be patient when walking, jogging, and certainly driving. Tonight, you should talk to a friend. Scorpio, you're also having a 2-star day. Be patient with your kids today. Likewise, be patient with social occasions and romantic partners. Everyone is having a tough time today, but tonight you're noticed. Sagittarius, also a 2-star day. Today, fiery Mars is in your sign at odds with stern Saturn, creating difficulties with family, especially older people. But tonight, you should explore. Capricorn, 3-star day. Keep your eyes open for hidden enemies or people who don't have your best interest at heart. This is the classic day for someone to act against you. Tonight, you should check your finances. For Aquarius, it's a 3-star day. Don't be aggressive when dealing with friends, groups, or organizations today. You might regret it. Many people are too pushy today, or perhaps they're bewildered. Tonight, cooperate. And finally, Pisces, you're going to have a 2-star day. Tread carefully today. You might feel hurt by something that's a boss, parent, or someone in authority says to you, or possibly that you are that person in power. And tonight the word is work.
And today in history has several really significant events. In 1941, the United States entered World War II as Congress declared war against Imperial Japan a day after the attack on Pearl Harbor. In 1980, rock star and former Beatle John Lennon was shot to death outside his New York City apartment building by Mark David Chapman. In 1987, President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev signed a treaty at the White House calling for the destruction of intermediate-range missiles. In 2012, Texas A&M quarterback Johnny Manziel became the first freshman to win the Heisman Trophy. In 2014, the U.S. and NATO ceremonially ended their combat mission in Afghanistan 13 years after the September 11th terrorist attack sparked their invasion of the country to topple the Taliban-led government. In 2016, John Glenn, whose 1962 flight as the first U.S. astronaut to orbit the Earth made him an American hero and propelled him to a long career in the U.S. Senate, died in Columbus, Ohio at the age of 95. In 2017, Japanese pitching and hitting star Shohei Ohtani announced that he would sign with the Los Angeles Angels. And finally, in 2022, Russia freed WNBA star Brittany Griner in a high-profile prisoner exchange with the U.S. that released Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout. Griner had been detained for nearly 10 months.
And in our political notebook today, Hegseth says Trump is able to use force. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth defended strikes on alleged drug cartel boats during remarks Saturday at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, saying President Trump has the power to take military action as he sees fit to defend the nation. Hegseth dismissed criticism of the strikes, which have killed more than 80 people, and now face intense scrutiny over the concerns that they have violated international law. Saying the strikes are justified to protect Americans, Hegseth likened the fight to the war on terror following the September 11th attacks. If you're working for a designated terrorist organization and you bring drugs to this country in a boat, we will find you and we will sink you. Let there be no doubt about it, Hegseth said. President Trump can and will take decisive military action as he sees fit to defend our nation's interests. Let no country on earth doubt that for a moment. The most recent strike brings the death toll of the campaign to at least 87 people. Lawmakers have sought more answers about the attacks and their legal justification and whether U.S. forces were ordered to launch a follow-up strike following a September attack even after the Pentagon knew of the survivors. During the speech, Hegseth also discussed the need to check China's rise through strength instead of conflict and repeated Trump's vow to resume nuclear testing on an equal basis as China and Russia.
You are listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Monday, December 8th on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for some more reading after this short break. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio Reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers today are
Ted by Jackie.
And I'm Ed Howard, and we're going to turn now to the city and regional section of the paper. And our first story is headlined, Conservative Student Group at UB Loses in Appeals Court. A conservative student group at the University of Buffalo sued in 2023, claiming rule changes for student organizations violated its members' free speech and assembly rights. A three-judge panel of the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals has now upheld the lower court ruling that threw out most of the legal claims made by the Young Americans for Freedom against UB's Student Association and some university administrators. The higher court panel, in a decision last month, agreed with U.S. District Judge Lawrence Villardo, who had earlier ruled that the Young Americans for Freedom's claims didn't amount to Student Association or UB violating the group's rights under the First Amendment. The case boils down to the plaintiffs' refusal to acknowledge compliance with a policy under which they have operated for several years, Villardo wrote. There is nothing about that policy or the required compliance that precludes the plaintiff from saying what they want, stops them from associating with any person or entity with whom they want to associate, or compels them to say anything they do not wish to say. Young Americans for Freedom, a chapter of the National Young Americans Foundation, filed their suit on June 1, 2023. 3 YAF members were plaintiffs at the time the suit was filed. Jacob Cassidy, the Young Americans for Freedom's current president, was initially part of the lawsuit, but he withdrew about 3 weeks after it was filed because he said he had plans to become an officer in the Navy, according to court documents. Cassidy was accused in late November of making threats to, quote, shoot up the school, unquote. Police seized 9 guns following a search of his car and his Orchard Park home. No criminal charges have been filed, but a judge allowed police to keep Cassidy's weapons for at least the next 6 months under New York's so-called red flag law, while they say an investigation into his alleged overheard remarks continues. The other 2 individual plaintiffs were Justin Hill, president of the group at the time. An amended complaint was filed in July 2023, and Amelia Slazars, an executive board member. The suit followed a change in rules by the Student Association, the student government for undergraduates at UB, which is a separate nonprofit organization from the university. The Student Association changed rules for recognizing certain clubs, barring groups affiliated, quote, with any outside organization, end quote. The rule change came in response to a March 2023 visit to the campus by conservative political commentator Mark Knowles, an event sponsored by the YAF. YAF dropped part of its lawsuit after the student government revoked the policy which banned student groups from being affiliated with national organizations. The suit continued because UB and Student Association still had policies that infringed on the civil rights of student groups. An attorney for Alliance Defending Freedom, which filed suit on behalf of the YAF, said at the time. In a written statement to the Buffalo News on Thursday, Chris Shandoval, senior counsel for the Alliance Defending Freedom, said the organization continues to work to protect students' constitutional freedoms. While we're disappointed by the Second Circuit's decision, we are pleased that our lawsuit forced the Student Association to repeal its unconstitutional policy prohibiting groups like Young Americans for Freedom at the University at Buffalo from associating with national organizations, Shandoval said. Both the Second Circuit and the District Court seemed receptive to a further lawsuit if the Student Association reinstates its policies that discriminate against groups based on their viewpoint, or if the Student Association applies its current policies in a viewpoint discriminatory way. The UB chapter of YAF was established in 2017 according to a document issued by the Young Americans Foundation. We are committed to taking a stand and protecting the freedom of all students to speak freely and without unconstitutional restrictions on campus, Hill said in the release.
School's leader on right-sizing efforts says this can be done. It might seem preposterous that Buffalo schools $402 million of cash reserves could still have the school district in perilous financial situation. But when the district has roughly 65 aging buildings to maintain, staffing levels inflated by COVID-19 relief funding, and expensive capital projects underway, that cushion of reserves feels a little less comfortable. Buffalo Schools Chief Financial Officer Jim Barnes has said consistently that three things need to happen in the short term for the district to have a financially sustainable path forward that does not require dipping deeply each year into its reserves. 2 school buildings need to be closed. About 100 positions need to be cut, and additional revenue streams need to be explored. The goal for the 2026-27 budget, the process for which began in the district last week, is to reduce the annual deficit from $78.8 million for 25-26 to $31.8 million for 26-27, Barnes said at a Buffalo School Board work session last Wednesday. The district's financial leader warned the Buffalo School Board of how quickly annual deficits can eat away at reserves if the district continues to operate at a structural deficit, where operations and staff costs grow while long-term enrollment figures dip. But if the board follows the district's blueprint, mass layoffs and state financial penalties should be able to be avoided. Here's the proof that this can be done. Positive state aid projections and some internal projects by Barnes' team are expected to net the district an additional $20 million in revenue through the 26-27 year, the department head said. Yes, cautiously, it's good news, Barnes told the board, but that does not negate in any way the need for our cost-cutting, right-sizing programs. Buffalo Schools enrollment, which had plummeted from about 31,000 students to 27,500 from 2018 to 24, projects to grow for a second consecutive year. State Education Department data reveals an increase of 377 kindergarten through 12th grade students from 23 to 24 to the 24-25, while Barnes said this year's count so far shows another increase of 326 students, although that figure is often in flux.
Staying on the front page of today's City and Region section, the next headline is 6 sites in Western New York get nominations for preservation. An envelope manufacturing facility in Buffalo, an energy-efficient office building, 2 former Western New York residences, a historic district in Forestville, and an Olean Basilica are poised to take their place in history after being nominated for the listing in the state and national registers of historic places. The State Board for Historic Preservation recommended adding 19 properties and districts across the state to the official list of buildings, structures, districts, landscapes, objects, and sites that are considered significant to the history of the state and the nation. More than 128,000 historic properties across New York are listed, and such properties and their owners are eligible for federal and state historic tax credits and grants for renovations. From 2018 to 2024, property owners in New York have invested $7.17 billion in rehabilitation expenses, the most of any state, and $16.4 billion since 2009. In Western New York, the Buffalo Envelope Company building at the corner of Michigan Avenue and Seneca Street was recommended for its role in producing envelopes for sale between 1909 and 1959. The company had been founded in 1888 at another location, but moved into the new building's 6-story section in 1899. The building at 270 Michigan received multiple additions in the 20th century, eventually occupying an entire city block. Also in Buffalo, the North Star building at 200 Division Street, which was constructed more recently in 1981 to 1982, was cited as, quote, architecturally significant for its pioneering design in the realm of energy efficiency in the wake of the energy crisis of the late 1970s and early 1980s. Despite being less than 50 years of age, the building has exceptional significance as an early experiment in what is now recognized as sustainable design, the state said. Designed by Mark Mendel of Canon Design, the building utilized a, quote, dramatically angled site orientation that includes both, quote, passive solar design and wind screening, as well as light shelves and an atrium with a skylight to provide natural light and roof-mounted solar collectors for heat transfer. These elements, which enable cost savings, were the first of their kind in downtown Buffalo and the first time they were used together for energy efficiency. The other 4 Western New York nominations include the Burton H. Hurd House in Elma, which was built for Burton H. Hurd, a descendant of one of the town's earliest families and a prominent business figure in Buffalo's lumber industry. The Smith Henry Building in Buffalo, which was originally constructed in 1855 as a 2-story brick home with a rear extension for hatmaker Samuel Smith, but was later altered and enlarged in 1914 by lawyer and real estate developer John Henry. The Center and Pearl Street Historic District in Forestville in the Chautauqua County of Hanover, located between Forestville's Commercial Main Street and the Railroad Depot, the district evolved from a collection of mills and houses in a forested area in the early 1800s. And finally, St. Mary of the Angels complex in Olean, which sits in a residential neighborhood on a small hill that rises from the Allegheny River. The company includes the Roman Catholic Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels, the former St. Mary's Convent, the former rectory and carriage house, and the Parish Life Center and former St. Mary's Academy.
And finally, in local news, Amherst renaming its main library for Shirley Chisholm. Amherst's largest public library will now bear the name of the barrier-breaking late Representative Shirley Chisholm. Chisholm, who died in 2005, was the first black woman elected to Congress and was the first woman and a person of color to seek a major party's nomination for president. She lived in Amherst for a decade, and her achievements, including staunch advocacy for civil rights and for those living in poverty, make her highly deserving of the honors supporters of the name argued. Renaming our library would honor the extraordinary legacy of a former Amherst resident and affirm our town's commitment to equity, civil participation, and inclusive public institutions. Sherry Chavone, the town resident and CEO of the Western New York Women's Foundation, said in the hearing, Shirley Chisholm was one of the most consequential political trailblazers of the 20th century. Chisholm, who was born in Brooklyn to immigrant parents, worked in early childhood education and oversaw daycare centers prior to her election to the State Assembly in 1964. She was the second black person in the New York State Legislature, and in 1968, the first black woman elected to Congress. She embraced the nickname Fighting Shirley and was known for her efforts to boost racial and gender equity, address poverty, and end the Vietnam War, according to the National Women's History Museum. Most public buildings that bear someone's name honor white men of the past, and far fewer recognize the accomplishments of women or people of color, experts say. Who we do and don't name buildings, memorials, or roads after reveals who society remembers worth remembering, said Carrie Winter, a University at Buffalo professor of American Studies.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 14 minutes past the hour, and on this Victory Monday, it is time to turn to sports. And we're going to start with Lance Lasowski's column, which is headlined, "Because of Allen, no one can count out the Bills." Facing some frightful flakes and the return of quarterback Burrow, the Bills iced the chilling win with Aaron and 2 quick picks. Weaving through the defense as snow covered the field at Highmark Stadium, Josh Allen reminded the Cincinnati Bengals and the rest of the NFL not to count out the Buffalo Bills. Once Allen reached the end zone 40 yards from where the play began, he spiked the football and leapt into the front row to celebrate with a crowd that must have thought his pivotal AFC matchup had been decided moments earlier when Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow gave his team a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. For all the Bills' faults, and there are many, they have the best player in the NFL. Allen's touchdown run, the longest by a quarterback in franchise history, got them back into the game, and his teammates ensured that it did not go to waste. On consecutive throws only 16 seconds apart on Sunday, Burrow got intercepted. One was returned 63 yards for a touchdown by Christian Benford, and the Bills held on to win 39-34. "Never a doubt," Allen said tongue-in-cheek, repeating a reporter's question following the comeback. "That was obviously a really tough game." The Bills improved to 9-4 this season, 16-2 at home since the start of 2024, and 13-1 in December over the past 3 years. It's the first time since 1990 and the third time in franchise history Buffalo has multiple comeback wins in a season after trailing by 10-plus points in the fourth quarter. The Bills overcame significant mistakes, none bigger than James Cook's fumble at the 2-yard line, to strengthen their chances to reach the playoffs for a 7th consecutive season. Regardless of injuries on defense and no matter whom the Bills face moving forward, their quarterback gives them a chance. Allen completed 22 of 28 passes for 251 yards and 3 touchdowns. He rushed for a season-high 81 yards, including the record 40-yard score and a 17-yard scramble on a 3rd and 15 on the final drive to secure the win. Allen became the first player in NFL history with 3 consecutive seasons of 20-plus passing touchdowns and 10-plus rushing touchdowns. Anytime number 17 touches the ball, it can go the distance, marveled Bills center Connor McGovern. The Bengals couldn't stop Allen in the second half. He had just 3 incompletions in the third and fourth quarters, and the Bills are going to need him to continue to play the way he did Sunday afternoon. The Bills' defensive line can't get to the quarterback, especially now that Joey Bosa has a hamstring injury. The cornerbacks outside of Benford may not stack up against the best units in the AFC, but any receiver or tight end should be able to get open when their quarterback has as much time to throw as Burrow did on Sunday. He completed 25 of 36 passes. His 4th down touchdown pass, a 25-yard throw to T. Higgins, cut Buffalo's lead to 39-34 with 2:13 remaining. Burrow didn't throw his second incomplete pass until the Bengals' 22nd offensive play. They started 7 for 7 on 3rd down, including completions of 11 and 14 yards, and their first failed conversion didn't come until late in the second quarter. Cincinnati, with a 4-9 record, scored on each of its first 3 possessions. It led by 10 points at halftime and 10 points with 8:44 left in the fourth quarter. But the Bengals couldn't win the matchup that mattered most. "We knew what kind of a game it was going to be," Burrow said. "Obviously, he's a great player and makes plays in all kinds of situations. I think the last play was the epitome of who he is as a player. You got to account for everything with him. He did a great job today."
Now we have some observations by Jay Skursky, who says, "Consecutive interceptions flipped the script for the Bills' defense in a wild win over the Bengals." Things were looking quite bleak for the Buffalo Bills midway through the fourth quarter on Sunday at Highmark Stadium. The visiting Cincinnati Bengals, led by quarterback Joe Burrow, had just put together what looked like to be the back-breaking touchdown drive, marching 80 yards in 12 plays following a James Cook fumble at the goal line that Cincinnati's defense had recovered for a touchback. Burrow capped the drive with a 12-yard touchdown pass to tight end Mike Gesicki, leading some of the fans to head for the exits. They ended up missing one heck of a comeback by the home team. Josh Allen reminded everyone why he's the reigning NFL MVP with another transcendent performance in the Bills' 39-34 victory. But it wouldn't have been possible without two key takeaways on back-to-back plays in a span of 16 seconds. First, Christian Benford leaped to intercept Burrow on a throw to a flat intended for Jamar Chase, then raced 63 yards to the end zone. Burrow's next pass on the Bengals' ensuing drive was deflected into the air by defensive tackle Jordan Phillips and right into the waiting arms of defensive end A.J. Epinesa for another interception. The offense took advantage of the short field with a 5-play, 29-yard touchdown drive that extended the Bills' lead to 39-28. Burrow and company needed just 4 plays and 50 seconds to go 66 yards for another touchdown to once again make it a game. Allen finally iced the win with a 17-yard scramble on 3rd and 15 with just over a minute remaining in the game. At that point, the Bills escaped with a much-needed win as Mr. Brightside blared over the speakers. The victory moved the Bills to 9-4, 2 games behind the Patriots, who are next week's opponent in the AFC East race, but comfortably in the AFC playoff picture. When you go against an elite quarterback like Joe Burrow, you're going to have to stay in it for as long as it takes, Bills coach Sean McDermott said. You've got to be at your best when it matters the most. Taking the ball away was huge, not only from an energy standpoint, but also the score element. The toughness of our football team when you go through adversity in life, and in football, in this case, you come out on the other side having learned some things about yourself and are tougher because of it. The Bills had spent the offseason retooling their defense for moments like Sunday, an elite quarterback coming into Orchard Park for a big game. Early on, it looked like all that retooling was going to result in a maddening, similar result. In the first half, the Bills' defense was not good enough in any way, shape, or form. Burrow was 13 of 18 for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half. The Bengals cashed in on touchdowns of both of their trips to the red zone as running back Chase Brown rushed one in from 5 yards out and later added a 10-yard touchdown catch that came after a review determined Brown had broke the plane of the goal line with possession. I think just continuing to play, continuing to put puzzle pieces together and solve problems, safety Jordan Poyer said of the lessons Buffalo can learn from Sunday's rally. They got a lot of really smart football players, smart coaches on this staff, and we're just going to continue to go out there and play. Obviously, when you win, when you lose, when you're able to learn from everything. Here are some observation points from him. Third down defense must get better. The Bengals converted their first 7 third downs. Yes, you read that right. The Bills' inability to get off the field was as predictable as it was frustrating to watch. The lone third down stop of the first half, if you want to call it that, came when Burrow slightly overthrew T. Higgins, who was wide open on a 3rd and 17. We were doing good on 1st and 2nd down. 3rd down, they were converting, simply put, it was a hard afternoon for us, in particular on 3rd down, McDermott said. The Bengals finished the game 10 of 12 on 3rd down, a statistic the Bills will have to improve in a major way moving forward. Second, James Cook's costly mistake. The Bills were in a position to take the lead with just about a minute left in the third quarter until their number one running back committed an egregious error. Cook lost a fumble at the goal line as cornerback DJ Turner II knocked it away and linebacker Oren Burks made the recovery. "I've got to hold the ball," Cook said after the game. "That's me. But got to move on. We've got to win and keep going." Third, Ty Johnson took a tumble. After Cincinnati opened the scoring with a 14-play, 67-yard touchdown drive that took 8 minutes and 16 seconds off the clock in the first drive of the game, the Bills' offense needed a response. It appeared to be in a good position to answer with a touchdown until the turf monster got Ty Johnson. The Bills' running back broke through the line and appeared to be on his way to an easy touchdown until he wasn't. Johnson slipped onto snowy turf, and what should have been a 36-yard touchdown run ended up being a 23-yard gain. The Bills failed to get the ball into the end zone after that and settled for a 26-yard field goal by Matt Prater. Fourth, another big comeback. The Bills recorded their second win of the season in which they trailed by at least 10 points in the fourth quarter. The only other 2 seasons in franchise history that the team had done that was 1967 and 1990. Before the game, McDermott went on the field to watch the kickers warm up to see how their footing would be impacted by Sunday's snowfall. He saw a sign advertising for fans to purchase seats from the stadium, which is now scheduled to hold just 2 more games. There is a possibility of more in the postseason, but the chances of that are getting quite remote. And fifth, Cole Bishop limped off. The Bills' second-year safety, who had found his groove in recent weeks, was in and out of the lineup during the second half because of cramping issues. As long as that doesn't develop into something more, Bishop should be good to go for next week's rematch against the Patriots. That's important because the Bills' depth at safety is not particularly strong, and the last thing Buffalo needs is another injury.
Well, staying with the Bills, it's time now to check the report card. This is Jay Skursky's report card, and the running game gets an A. The Bills used their cheat code Sunday as quarterback Josh Allen rushed 9 times for 78 yards. Included in that were 2 of the biggest plays of the game, his 40-yard rushing touchdown in the fourth quarter that cut the Bills' deficit to 3 points at the time, and his 17-yard scramble on 3rd and 15 with just about a minute left that allowed the offense to run out the clock. Running back James Cook had 80 rushing yards on 18 carries, but lost a costly fumble near the goal line. Cook has had some spectacular games this season, but this was not one of them. The passing game gets an A. Allen became the first player in NFL history with 3 seasons of 20-plus passing touchdowns and 10-plus rushing touchdowns. He finished 22 of 28 for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns, a quarterback rating of 139.7. The run defense also gets an A. The Bengals finished with a scant 19 yards rushing attempts for 62 yards. There was an element of why run when you can throw to that total, but the Bills' defense didn't allow a run of 10 yards. Middle linebacker Shaq Thompson ended the first quarter with a great stop on Chase Brown for a loss of 3 yards. The pass defense, however, gets a C. Burrow threw for 4 touchdowns, so it's hard to give this group a better grade than this. Of course, the 2 interceptions means that it's hard to give it a worse grade either. For special teams, they get a B. You can't take anything for granted on a slippery field. The special teams got the job done. After missing an extra point in consecutive games, kicker Matt Prater had no issues with the Bengals hitting a 26-yard field goal and 4 extra points. And finally, coaching, they get a B too. It's a glass half full, glass half empty situation for the defense right now. On one hand, the coaches deserve credit for in-game adjustments. On the other, the slow starts to games are troubling. Third down issues absolutely have to be addressed. Credit offensive coordinator Joe Brady for going right at the Bengals' weakness, covering tight ends. The Bills exploited that wonderfully. Brady stuck with the running game, even when it wasn't opening holes the way it did last week. The end result, however, was a much-needed victory.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and the time is 30 minutes after the hour. And because it's so cold, we'll end our sports section by taking a look at the desperate Sabres who plan to shake up their lines. They have a game tonight against Calgary, and things are going to look a little bit different tonight. Lindy Ruff delivered on his promise to mix up the lines in the wake of the Buffalo Sabres' last two games. 2 days after a 4-1 loss to the Winnipeg Jets in Manitoba, the second game of a 6-game road trip, the Sabres coach put 3 new line combinations on the ice Sunday at the Scotiabank Saddledome ahead of the 9 p.m. face-off tonight against the Calgary Flames. Zach Benson and Josh Doan skated on a line that was centered by Josh Norris. Jordan Greenaway and Alex Tuck skated on a line with Tage Thompson at center. Tyson Kozak worked on the fourth line with Peyton Krebs and Beck Malestein. The only line to stay intact? The line of Jason Zucker, Ryan McLeod, and Jack Quinn. Ruff's rationale for the near wholesale changes: create more 5-on-5 scoring chances and goals. Calgary's got one of the best goals against records. They've given up 24 goals in their 16 games in their home building. And we know it's going to be hard, Ruff said. Shaking up lines a little bit may create a little bit of excitement for a few guys. 60 of the Sabres' 82 goals in the 28 games this season have come in 5-on-5 situations, but only one in the last 2 games, Bowen Byram's tally in the 5-2 loss Wednesday at Philadelphia. It was a sharp deviation from a 5-1 win last Monday against Winnipeg, in which the Sabres scored 4 goals in even strength situation, including 2 from Norris.
Well, now it's time to ask Eric and get life's problems solved. And the first one is headlined, Issues Between Father, Adult Son Hamper Birthday Plans. Dear Eric, my son is turning 40 on December 22nd. My husband and I are at a quandary as to how to celebrate him. There have been issues between my husband and him over things from his childhood. We did a special trip for his older brother when he turned 40 and would like to do something special for this son's 40th as well. Our daughter-in-law has made special plans for him and we are not included. I understand that, but I need some ideas as to how to celebrate this extra special year without rocking the boat. I love my son with all my heart, as I do all my children, and want his 40th birthday to be memorable in a positive way. Any suggestions? Signed, Mom, who wants to celebrate. Dear Mom, the issues your son and your husband are having may be an obstacle, but they are not insurmountable. And the thing that can get them on the path to resolution is the same thing that can get you answers about how to celebrate your son: open communication. It's not within your purview to try to fix things between them, but you have your own relationship with your son, so I'd encourage you to reach out and tell him what you told me. You want to celebrate him, you know things are difficult, and you're looking for options. This is deceptively simple, and it's something that all of us so often neglect to do. It can feel awkward to acknowledge tension in a relationship or to ask someone what they want or how they want to feel valued, but that kind of vulnerability is the cornerstone of healthy communication. Your son may not have a concrete idea about what you can do to celebrate him, and that's okay too, but by bringing it up, you introduce the idea that you want to celebrate him, that he's important to you, and that you're putting his needs first here. That's going to go a long way. Your celebration with your son may not end up happening for his actual 40th birthday, but by laying the groundwork now, you keep the lines of communication open for a meaningful celebration when everyone is ready. Dear Eric, my husband, 67 of 15 years, has many sterling qualities. The issue? He is cheap. He'll graciously allow me to treat him to expensive meals and say thank you while over-tipping the cute young server, but when he's anxiously asking if I'm sure about paying, he somehow never thinks to offer to pay for his own meal. He hasn't worked a real job since 2020. I am still freelancing and both of us get Social Security, but mine is about half of his amount. He apologizes for being cheap, but it doesn't mean he's willing to pony up, and he often exaggerates the cost of things such as the house insurance and bemoans having to pay for items post-pandemic. Meanwhile, he has significant bank accounts from dead relatives and, quote, forgets, unquote, about the interest payments that mean I don't get a tax refund anymore. As for my last birthday, we went to a bistro and shared a sandwich, while he chose a pricey new Thai restaurant for his. Our anniversary meal, at home. Before retiring, he used to treat me to a restaurant meal, either breakfast or lunch, 2 or 3 times a month. Now, he says he's too aggravated when we leave the house, so eating lunch is too stressful for him. Should I simply start going out to eat alone? Signed, Picking Up the Check. Dear Check, for many people, fears of financial insecurity can often trump the reality of their financial situation. This might be what's going on with your husband. Feelings aren't facts, but they can masquerade as such and drive our actions. You may not be able to reason with him enough to rid him of the cheapness, especially when he seems to pick and choose things about which to be cheap. But you can give yourself and him tools to combat that mindset. Talk with a financial advisor together. It sounds like you keep your accounts separate, so a conversation with a financial advisor can help with the process of creating a budget for shared expenses. Budgets are often a reflection of our values. So this can be a safe space to talk about the value you place on going out to eat. A budget will also give you concrete numbers to point to when his anxiety about the cost of something creeps up. Things may feel too expensive when in reality they're well within the range of affordability. Lastly, do take yourself out now and then. You've earned this money and you should have the meals you want to have.
And our next article is about healthy living, and the headline is just 2 words: fresh water. You keep your trusty reusable bottle filled with only clear, delicious water. Do you still need to wash it? Experts say reusable bottles get grubby no matter what liquid they're filled with, and it's important to clean them regularly. Water bottles pick up germs from our mouths when we take a sip, from our hands when we touch the straw or the lid. They're covered in tiny, tough-to-reach nooks and crannies that can become breeding grounds for mold, bacteria, and other microbes if left unscrubbed. It seems like something mundane, but it's really important, said nurse practitioner Michelle Krupner, who works with the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. Unclean water bottles can cause stomach aches and itchy throats, and even exacerbate allergies and asthma. Experts disagree on when and how you should wash them, but they're all in agreement on one thing: give your water bottle a tender, loving clean, because something is better than nothing at all. Is it that big of a deal? No. But it's also not difficult to just wash your bottle, said Dr. Mike Wren, a family medicine physician at the Baylor College of Medicine. Experts say the gunk doesn't care what your water bottle is made of. Reusable metal, plastic, and glass bottles all grow germy, but plastic bottles are more likely to get scratches or dings on the inside, where microbial life can cozy up. The best cleaning routine is a simple one. Use a sponge or a bottle brush to scrub inside and out with warm, soapy water. Rinse it out and let it dry so it's ready for the next refill. A narrow or pipe cleaner shaped tool can be useful in getting into straws and those tight crevices. For a deeper wash, scientists recommend popping the bottle in the dishwasher, if it's safe to do so, or dissolving a denture or retainer cleaning tablet in the bottle overnight. Scrubbing with warm water solutions of vinegar or baking soda also works. Many experts recommend doing a simple soapy water clean every day and a deep clean once a week. If daily cleaning feels a little extra, Wren said to try to get to do it at least every other week or so, while maintaining other good habits like rinsing the mouthpiece over the sink during each refill. But if you fill your reusable bottle with other beverages like protein shakes or exercise drinks, it really is important to clean every day. Sugary drinks leave a residue that bacteria love to snack on. Is it okay to leave water in a reusable bottle overnight? Experts disagree. Some say to dump the dregs out every refill, while others recommend emptying every few hours. Wren says it's likely okay to leave some inside overnight, but to empty old water at least every few days. Guidelines are guidelines, Wren said. Everyone's going to do a little bit differently. If there's visible mold on the bottle or the liquid inside has a weird smell, don't drink it. Avoid refilling disposable plastic water bottles, since chemicals can leach into the water, and they're even more full of cracks and crevices that can harbor these germs. Water bottle cleaning routines may not at all look the same, but it's important to keep up the habit, said Ivy Sun, a hospitality expert at the Georgia Southern University who has studied water bottle contamination. She washes her and her kids' bottles with soapy water every day. This is just a very small step that we do, but it can largely help with our health, Sun said.
In Washington news, our headline is Trump, Cuellar disloyal. President fumes after a lawmaker decides to run again as a Democrat. President Donald Trump is angry that Representative Henry Cuellar is running again as a Democrat rather than switch parties after the president pardoned the Texas congressman and his wife in a federal bribery and conspiracy case. Trump blasted Cuellar for, quote, such a lack of loyalty, suggesting that the Republican president might have expected the clemency to bolster the GOP's narrow House majority heading into the 2026 midterm elections. Cuellar, in a television interview on Sunday after Trump's social media post, said he was a conservative Democrat willing to work with the administration, quote, to see where we can find common ground, end quote. The congressman said he prayed for the president and the presidency at church that morning, quote, because if the president succeeds, the country succeeds. Citing a fellow Texas politician, the late President Lyndon Johnson's, Cuellar said that he was an American, Texan, and a Democrat in that order. I think anybody that puts the party before their country is doing a disservice to their country, he told Fox News Channel's Sunday Morning Futures. Trump noted on his Truth Social platform that the Democratic President Joe Biden's administration had brought charges against Cuellar and the congressman by running once more as a Democrat was continuing to work with the same, quote, the same radical left, unquote, that wanted him and his wife in prison, and again quoting, and probably still do. Quoting again, such a lack of loyalty, something that Texas voters and Henry's daughters will not like. Oh well, next time, no more Mr. Nice Guy, end quote. Trump said Cuellar's two daughters, Christina and Catherine, sent Trump a letter in November asking that he pardon their parents. Trump explained his pardon, he announced on Wednesday, as a matter of stopping a, quote, weaponized, unquote, prosecution. Cuellar was an outspoken critic of Biden's immigration policy, a position that Trump saw as a key alignment with the lawmaker. Cuellar has said he has good relationships within his party. I think the General Democrat Caucus and I, we get along, but they know that I'm an independent voice, he said. A party switch would have been an unexpected bonus for the Republicans after the GOP-run legislature redrew the state's congressional districts this year at Trump's behest. The Texas maneuver started a mid-decade gerrymandering squabble playing out across multiple states. Trump is trying to defend the Republicans' House majority and avoid a repeat of his first term when Democrats dominated the House midterms and used a majority to stymie the administration, launch investigations, and twice impeach Trump. Yet Cuellar's South Texas district, which includes parts of Metro San Antonio, was not one of the Democratic districts that Republicans changed substantially, and Cuellar believes he remains well-positioned to win re-election.
In media news, we have a review of a movie that's coming out at Christmas time, and the headline is Meaningful Acts. And it's the author of this article says it's a charming film about rental family, which is, he called, a holiday winner. If actors go where the work is, Japan doesn't seem like quite a stretch. The work does. In Rental Family, Brendan Fraser plays Philip, a down-on-his-luck actor who isn't getting many gigs as the token American. When he accepts a different role as a mourner at a faked funeral, Phillips gets an offer to play other based-in-reality parts. Since his gig as a toothpaste commercial has ended, he's more than willing to play everything from a journalist to a fake husband. His close encounter as a young girl's dad gives Philip plenty of opportunity to stretch. But his guise as a rental dad to an 11-year-old Mia proves too difficult to drop. The girl doesn't know he's posing and is eager to understand why he left her and her mother. Naturally, the faux pas, and it's spelled pa, P-A, like in Papa, is charmed and pulled in. The two go on plenty of bonding adventures and look headed for a relationship after the show closes. But this is where director Hikari works her magic. She shows where the rental business has its pitfalls and where it actually might work. Rental Family is blessed with smart performances up and down the line. Takiro Hira is appropriately droll as the company owner. Akira Emoto is affecting as the actor who doesn't want to be forgotten. The encounters aren't just hit and run. They're imprints on Philip's heart. And, as we learned with The Whale, Fraser is an actor who can feel plenty. He brings out the best in his co-stars and isn't afraid to reveal that he has learned something in the process. Rental Family shows off Japan too and suggests there's value in tradition and respect. When Mia learns the truth about the man who could change her life, Rental Family touches us in ways we didn't think possible. It's a great family film for the holidays. Watch it with someone you love, and you'll realize how important gestures of caring really are.
Well, turning to a digest of national and world news now, Trump says Zelensky is, quote, not ready for peace. President Donald Trump claimed Sunday that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, quote, isn't ready, unquote, to sign off on a U.S.-authored peace proposal aimed at ending the Russia-Ukraine war. Trump was critical of Zelensky after U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators completed 3 days of talks Saturday aimed at trying to narrow differences on the U.S. administration's proposal. But in an exchange with reporters Sunday night, Trump suggested that the Ukrainian leader is holding up the talks from moving forward. Russia is, I believe, fine with it, but I'm not sure that Zelensky's fine with it. His people love it, but he isn't ready, Trump said. The DOT waives part of a fine for Southwest Airlines. The U.S. Department of Transportation will waive part of a fine assessed against Southwest Airlines after the company canceled thousands of flights during a winter storm in 2022. Under a 2023 settlement reached by the Biden administration, Southwest agreed to a $140 million civil penalty. The government said at the time that the penalty was the largest it ever imposed on an airline for violating consumer protection laws. Most of the money went towards compensation for travelers, but Southwest agreed to pay $35 million into the U.S. Treasury. Southwest had made a $12 million payment in 2024 and a second $12 million payment earlier this year. But the Department of Transportation issued an order Friday waiving the final $11 million payment. Japan and China. Briefly, Japan and Australia urged calm Sunday after Chinese military aircraft locked radar on Japanese fighter jets a month after the Japanese leader's recent remarks on Taiwan that stirred tensions between Tokyo and Beijing. Japanese Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi called it an extremely regrettable act. In Mexico, the number of victims killed in an explosion outside a police station in western the Mexican state of Michoacan over the weekend rose to 5, the Attorney General's office said on Sunday. 12 others were injured following Saturday's explosion in the town of Coahuila, according to the office. In Hong Kong, about a third of Hong Kong registered voters elected a new 90-member legislature on Sunday, a turnout that avoided an embarrassment for the government, but fell short of a ringing endorsement of an electoral system revamp that eliminated the once feisty opposition in the Chinese territory. Benin President Patrice Talon condemned an attempted coup on Sunday that was foiled by the country's army in his first public comments since the sporadic gunfire was heard in parts of the administrative capital, Cotonou. In Colombia, 2 police officers were killed on Sunday in northeastern Colombia in an attack that authorities blamed on the National Liberation Army, a Marxist guerrilla force active since the 1960s. And in London, police arrested a man Sunday in London's Heathrow Airport after a crowd of people were hit with pepper spray during a robbery at a parking garage that caused several hours of travel disruptions. 5 people were taken by ambulance to a hospital, and another 16 were treated at the scene, officials said. None of the injuries was believed to be serious.
And a judge rules against the DOJ effort to indict Comey again. A federal judge dealt a setback to Justice Department's efforts to seek a new indictment against former FBI Director James Comey, temporarily barring prosecutors from using evidence they relied on when they initially secured criminal charges. The ruling Saturday night from U.S. District Judge Colleen Collar-Cotelli does not preclude the department from trying again soon to indict Comey, but it does suggest prosecutors may have to do so without citing communications between Comey and a close friend, Columbia University law professor Daniel Richman. Comey was charged in September with lying to Congress when he denied having authorized an associate to serve as an anonymous source for media coverage about the FBI. Prosecutors cited messages between Comey and Richman that they said showed Comey approving of Richman interacting with journalists for FBI-related coverage. The case was dismissed last month after a different federal judge ruled that the prosecutor who filed the charges, Lindsay Halligan, was unlawfully appointed by the Trump administration. But that ruling left open the possibility that the government could try again to seek charges against Comey, a longtime foe of President Donald Trump. After the case was thrown out, lawyers for Richman sought a court order to bar prosecutors from continued access to his computer files, which the Justice Department obtained through search warrants in 2019 and 2020 as part of a media leak investigation that was closed without any charges.
And we'll close out today with a couple of hints from Heloise. Dear Heloise, I've read your column for many years, and this is the first time that I have responded to an inquiry. Telling guests how much they have to pay to attend a wedding is just classless. If you're worried about your return on investment, don't spend a lot on your reception. Cut back on frivolous things. Signed by Patty C. in Waterbury, Connecticut. Can you imagine being charged admittance to a wedding? My goodness.
What's the world coming to?
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, December 8th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ted Petchak
and Ed Howard, and we wish you a pleasant day.
Bye.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you. Are you facing challenges with vision loss and need help with your smartphone, sending emails, navigating the internet, and staying connected with your family? VIA, Visually Impaired Advancement, is offering free classes for seniors weekly at multiple locations with free assistance for your smartphone, email, and internet skills. There's a new session every week, and it rotates between the South Towns and the North Towns. It's at your local Erie County libraries and at 10 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. For more information, call Elhana Porter at 716-888-4632. Again, that's 716-888-4632. Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the New York Times Magazine. Following that, at noon is today's USA Today. Stay with us for these readings and more. who are blind, have low vision,